president of the Valley Industry and Commerce Association, and welcome to our video presentation of the Business Forecast Conference. We had an incredible day. Our panelists were fantastic. We had more than 30 panelists, more than 40 exhibitors. Our panels talked about entertainment, healthcare reform, government reform, energy, water and transportation, as well as our morning panel, which were 3 economists that talked about the state of the economy, followed up by our luncheon keynote speaker, Jane Werwand, the founder of Dermalogica, who gave a great and incredible speech about finding opportunity in these uncertain times. I think you're going to enjoy these videos. You can find them on iTunes. You can look them up on YouTube at the VICA channel. And we appreciate that you're taking the time out of your day to look at this. And I think you'll see that next year you definitely want to be at this conference. And if you're interested in joining VICA, look at www.vica.com.
To predetermine those outcomes. Let me speak in some categories for a second based on our first hearing. First, there need to be reforms to the way the legislative process works. In that regard, we need to be prioritizing the state's work more effectively. Too many bills, too little focus on the most important stuff. Secondly, we need to be finding structural ways to incentivize bipartisanship. Partisanship is in many ways a good thing. Another term that's synonymous with partisanship, another phrase would be the expression of core values. You like that in legislative leaders. But finding common ground needs to happen more. Third, got to be doing better oversight. We don't do a great job in the state legislature of determining whether what we've done previously is effective or not. Legislative reform. Budget reform. We do need to re-examine the 2/3, both with regard to how we enact the budget and also regarding revenues. Beneath that, though, are a number of things we can be doing that we began to discuss last week. Performance-based budgeting, where we actually test the efficacy of programs before we automatically fund them. Good idea. Multiple-year budgeting to enable us to devote more time to oversight and rivet ourselves on other priorities in the non-budget years. A real opportunity for us, I think. We should be talking more about the initiative process. The initiatives, I used to teach people how to be public officials at the Public Affairs School at UCLA. Pardon me. And one of the things about that, that program is I described how we got to have the initiatives. As we know, the progressives came from Iowa. They wanted an antidote to the robber barons and the oil guys in the state legislature. And so they said, let's find a big counterweight to give to the people. A great thing. Except that it's been turned on its head. So it was designed to be an antidote to moneyed special interests, and in fact it is the key creature, in the main, of moneyed special interests. We need to change that. I think there are some basic ideas that, again, speaking for myself, not for the committee, that make some sense. For example, if you're going to propose a new initiative with a new program in it, you better say how you're going to pay for it. We ought to be trying to vet things in more detail before they get to the ballot. Concentrating ballot measures on elections that are likely to have the largest turnout, so a broad swath of folks are involved. Changing the Constitution ought to be requiring some sort of majority, it seems to me. And, people talk about term limits. I'm not a credible message carrier on term limits. I will tell you in our first hearing, academics, former legislators, leaders from both parties came to our committee and said that needs to change. We can talk about what that means as well. There are multiple tiers to this, including how we apportion delivery of services between the state and local governments, and potentially reorganizing and making more efficient the structure of government. As you can tell, I think this is an action.
System seems to be broken. Now there's a temptation to say in a time like this, let's throw the bums out. We don't believe that the leaders and the assembly members and senators are bums. We believe that very well-meaning people who are stuck in a broken system, who we think may be as frustrated as we are. So they gave us a mission to go and find a way to fix the governance of California. Kind of a tough assignment. But there was the president of the Senate at that time, a guy named Don Ferrara, sort of threw out a joke, and he said, maybe it's time for a constitutional convention. And our members went, oh, what's that? And so we've done a lot of research, historical research, academic research, political research. We've held town halls up and down the state. And yesterday, actually, it seems like a long time ago, but we turned in 2 measures to call a constitutional convention for the state of California. I'll give you the quick of it, and then if there's questions later, we can get into it further. It's a limited constitutional convention. Lots of other states have done this. It can be limited if you do it through the initiative process. If the legislature calls a constitutional convention, there's a lot of legal opinion that you cannot limit it. But because it's on the ballot, and the voters are approving the convention and limiting the topics of it, those are judicially enforceable. What are the limits? This is a constitutional convention to deal with governance. So that breaks into 4 broad categories. That's government efficiency. We have about 389 statewide boards, commissions, agencies, and departments. A lot of them are duplicative, and they diffuse responsibility for policy areas. And so no one in effect ends up being responsible for these policy areas. So Texas has a sunset commission, where they actually merge agencies or departments. Sometimes they create new ones, but it's a way to start getting at that diffused responsibility and trying to concentrate it. Second,
once you tweak the system, no matter how you tweak the different forms, until you get to the root of the issue, nothing will change. Due to gerrymandered districts, a small percentage of highly partisan voters actually determine the makeup of our state legislature, which is highly partisan as well, and caused a lot of the gridlock. Therefore, we believe the very makeup of the state legislature is fundamentally flawed. So we believe that California needs an overhaul of its leadership, starting with the California state legislature. California needs to return to the citizen legislature it was prior to 1966, where people from the real world with real world experiences were elected to serve up in the state legislature. They operated on a part-time basis, limited session, addressed budget issues, other new legislation, and then went home to live and work under the rules they make and live among the people they were elected to represent.
The things we learned was that states that had successful budgeting and governance practices that were supportive of economic development in those states had 2 primary pieces to their governance and fiscal models. One was they were forward-looking. They had multi-year budgeting operations. They extended their fiscal horizons. California has this whole model, basically a model that was developed in the 1960s, that was an annual budgeting process that was determined on the basis of what you got in the prior year plus growth. Performance simply wasn't an issue. We learned from these other states that not only a longer fiscal horizon, but rather tests of performance actually matter. The state of Washington was a pretty good example, state of Virginia, and there's a long list of those states that have transformed their budget-making system into a performance-based system. What Mike had indicated earlier is what we hope is a continuing recognition that actually performance matters, and you could look at to see what the value for money was coming out of the budget-making process. So we've suggested 2 things. One of them, a multi-year budgeting process, and a budgeting process that's based on performance. The second thing we've suggested is that where there's a new program that people are talking about, you ought to figure out how to. Now you might think this is a radical idea. But friends, this is actually how we used to do business. Look back at the administrations of both Pat Brown and Ronald Reagan. I can go back into Earl Warren as well. And when there was a proposal for a new program, they worried about how to finance it. When Governor Reagan was concerned about property tax relief and increasing the homeowners exemption, what did they do? They raised the sales tax to finance it. So you think now, gee, if someone had a major tax reduction that they wanted to do, how ought it to be financed? Should there be programs cut or other taxes raised? And I'm astounded to find that people go, oh, gee, if you wanted to cut a tax, you can't raise another one. Well, that's the old model. That's what we used to do. So almost all of the tax increases that occurred during the Reagan administration were done for the purposes of reconstructing the tax system.